right, so let's get right into it. Tito, just introduce yourself for everyone, and people know you in the CDR space, but for those that don't, or not in the space.
Hi, I'm Tito. I am the CEO and co-founder of AirMiners. We're a community and ecosystem for innovators in carbon removal. We started out with an accelerator program that's had 200 startup companies graduate from it, all in carbon removal. They've raised $150 million and they've sold $63 million of carbon credits. We have educational programs. We support up-and-coming buyers in carbon credits, so corporate leaders who are looking to lead through carbon removal, and that's what AirMiners is all about: is how to remove 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide by 2030 to get us on track for a stable climate and a thriving human civilization.
Yeah, and I like what's been happening in the space in terms of just the optimism, the ingenuity, the bravery, the collaboration. There's a lot of elements to CDR that's outside of just what it's doing, which is cycling carbon and restoring deep carbon pools, right? So I think it's a vibrant community that's going to last, even though there are problems ahead, maybe in the funding category. And I think that's what at first we wanted to talk about, rather than go into defining CDR, because everyone who's watching this will know what it is. So I think we're going to just jump right into sort of the tail end of the conversation I had with you when we did the screening at Stanford, which was the concern around funding from the US government right now. So what are your concerns right now?
Yeah, the concern is that the US federal government has been such a big funder of carbon removal. I mean, literally, we had teams in our accelerator moving operations to the United States after the announcement for the DAC hubs, for the CDR pre-purchase pilot prize, both of which combined are unlocking billions of dollars for carbon removal. We had teams saying, okay, how do I get to the United States? Now, in the last couple of weeks, there's been a blanket pause on funding related to climate. And so that means that carbon removal gets caught up in that, and so that means there's concerns and uncertainty around is this funding going to is there going to be more funding that comes into carbon removal, or is it was just the first couple $1 billion and now it's an industry to take it the rest of the way.
Right. I mean, two questions. One, how important was government funding, and can private investors support this industry for now?
Carbon removal originally got kicked off by private investors. We had corporations, we had individual funds. Chris Sacca raised a $350 million fund for carbon removal just a few years ago in 2021. And alongside Stripe announcing that they were investing $1 million in carbon removal solutions, which went on to become the Frontier $1 billion coalition. So we saw incredible leadership from corporates, from investors, bringing carbon removal forward, and the funding from the U.S. federal government really took that to a whole nother level of billions of dollars. Is that something that industry can take on? We see large industrial players like Mitsubishi, a Japanese conglomerate that, among other things, does big project development and are excited about the project development that's needed for carbon removal. And I think whatever the future holds for federal funding, I think that industry taking on carbon removal as an opportunity, as a business opportunity for them, is something that's the next step that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And that also is helped by the maturation of the voluntary markets, right, for removals, or is that a separate issue? Because it's mostly we need funding for pilots, but also that second stage now, because a lot of things are out of pilot and ready to go scale, which obviously is more money and all of that. Is that second tranche of funding tied to voluntary removal markets, or no?
So the voluntary markets are a big part of the growth of carbon removal. Carbon removal currently is a small percentage of the voluntary carbon market. Last year, The entire market was about $1 billion, and this includes all different types of carbon credits, carbon offsets. Carbon removal specifically was only about 4% of that market last year. 98% of which was focused on afforestation. So a really small piece of this was focused on things like enhanced rock weathering, direct air capture, and biochar. But that sector is growing very quickly in the voluntary carbon market, and the VCM itself, the voluntary carbon market itself, is growing. Really spurred on by what we saw at COP29 in Azerbaijan, where the UN moved forward the framework for a global carbon market. So a global way for countries to produce carbon credits, to exchange carbon credits, to buy carbon credits. And so really setting up that framework for a moving from a voluntary carbon market to, as governments start to say, hey, actually, this is going to be required. And so that was a big move in the last 6 months towards the growth of carbon removal.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the incentive to pay for something that is removed and not used is a conceptual value, right? And so going forward without regulation, like if we could do it in a free market, what would be that future value of that removal? Do we know what that is yet, and how that is that why people are removing? Or are they just doing it to be good citizens, which obviously is not really going to bring tons of money into a space, the moral argument, unfortunately. So what in that voluntary market are we leaning in on to help mobilize money through the markets?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at the thesis of these different organizations that are investing in carbon removal, you mentioned Carbon Removal Partners, which is extremely active in investing. They only invest in carbon removal companies. If you look at the thesis for them, for lower carbon capital, for Counteract, other companies other firms that are specializing in carbon removal, and then you look at who's participating in the voluntary carbon market. There's this theme that starts to emerge where you see that companies that are participating, and what investors are seeing is actually this $1 trillion opportunity. Because if you back out from the IPCC models, this is the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They have models around here's how much carbon removal is needed, 10 billion tons per year by 2050. Bloomberg NEF put out a model that predicts that we'll hit $100 a ton for carbon removal by 2050. That's kind of how the cost curve will come down as we scale this, as we grow this, as we improve it, and get somewhere like $100 a ton. $100 a ton times 10 billion tons per year, that's that $1 trillion market. And so that's where you have investors looking at that, you have corporates looking at that, you have organizations like project developers saying, look, this is a giant global scale project. We want to be behind the development of direct air capture, biochar, enhanced rock weathering, ocean-based solutions. This is a massive opportunity for project developers. Same thing for other early participants in the voluntary carbon market. If you're involved in the financial system, in the insurance system, you can see a world where carbon climate gets included into financial transactions, into just everyday purchases that happen. And then you say, okay, well, then we should be getting, if we want to build this financial system in the future, if we want to be the insurance provider of the future, carbon's going to be a big piece of that. So let's go invest in the future of our business by engaging in carbon removal. Same thing with consulting firms that say, look, this is something that every Fortune 2000 CEO is going to need to understand what is happening with this emerging $1 trillion industry. We're going to get to really know it, and then we're going to be a source of knowledge and tooling for the entire world as this $1 trillion industry takes shape.
Yeah, I mean, the point of the question obviously is how does this industry become resilient from any government orientation towards funding it? So speak to what the ripple effect is for the pulling back of funding for these DAC hubs right now, even though it's a pause. We don't even know really what's going to happen to them, but let's just say it had an immediate effect.
Yeah, it has an immediate effect of adding uncertainty to the system. So if you are, if you're a startup that's relying on this funding, I think that's kind of the most adjacent to, okay, that's going to cause challenges there. But if you're a bank looking at financing direct air capture hubs or financing project development in the United States, this pause on funding is more significant in the sense that it says, well, baked into the model around financing these things is, what are the federal policies around carbon removal and pricing? What are the federal policies around solar? Because if you need solar to power these systems, as you do with direct air capture, and so if you need solar, then it becomes part of the infrastructure for that. So then it just immediately adds all this uncertainty around the entire project, which is, that's the business of banks, is figuring out, okay, where are the uncertainties? What can we actually put together? And this, a pause like this it's more than the immediate funding that's paused. It's also the outlook on where is U.S. policy headed on carbon removal, on solar, on clean energy, and those impacts are much greater in terms of financing and development for carbon removal projects.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think we should all react to this? And have you thought proactively about becoming resilient in this environment? But maybe they do think it should be in the realm of the private sector, which is hence why I had that question about the markets and how it would be attractive to investors so that can be funded privately. So, but what are your thoughts? Because I know you probably have a few.
Yeah, it's, as soon as the White House removed climate change from its website, I think we really entered this moment where we have this window to counteract that, to say, look, this is actually where things need to go instead. Is we really do need carbon removal. We need it to scale, and we need to get to a stable climate. The challenge is, if we don't, then taking climate change off your website just becomes the thing that everybody does because it's safe, because everybody else is doing it. And so we have this window to counteract that. Specifically, AirMiners is working on how do we unleash corporate champions, so people who are from within large organizations that have budgets or have the ability to make an impact and say, look, we're committed to carbon removal. We see this as an opportunity for a business. I think it's really a time to highlight and to create more champions for carbon removal throughout the United States and throughout the world.
And I think it's also a time to reframe what it is that we're doing, because of the politicization of climate, it kind of even bothers me, the word. I've been in the space for a very long time, and it almost isn't even about proving or analyzing weather cycles, long-term geologic cycles, and things like that. What CDR specifically is an innovation. It's a new innovation of taking carbon that is now in the sky that used to be in the ground and removing it or using it. And that's something that was sort of verboten for some companies because they wanted to be this solution only for climate, the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the sky. And they want to say, look, we're reducing that. We're taking care of legacy carbon. We're putting it back in the ground. We're healing the deep carbon pools, which is all fantastic and great, but you can also use it. And that utilization side, I think, is extremely compelling, because eventually a DAC machine is going to be so cheap that drilling in the Arctic or, pipelines and all that giant infrastructure is going to look silly compared to a tiny little DAC machine that can pull carbon out of the sky and make fuel and decentralize also the production, which is also extremely exciting. So what about that? That's, I think, very a unifying message anyway. I always say to people, last thought is like, imagine having a gas station in your garage. Let's just say, isn't that attractive to people?
I think about this moment. I'm watching Elon Musk launch Starship, and he's talking about, somebody asks him, what do you, right now it's just this one, with one ship, what's going to be here in the future? And the first thing he goes to is, we are going to have all of these carbon removal machines around, capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, producing the fuel that we need for Starship. And I think that vision that you're speaking to, and we saw it in Legion 44, right? In terms of here's farmers benefiting from enhanced rock weathering, benefiting from biochar. It makes better crops. It's good for water retention. Taking seaweed and using it to make products and removing carbon at the same time. I think these benefits are really there, and they create this kind of incredible umbrella for carbon removal. You can fit major industries into carbon removal that will win from carbon removal. It makes it different than any climate innovation that's come before, in a sense that if you look at solar, if you're making solar panels, you're benefiting from that. If you have the raw materials for solar panels, you're benefiting from that. Carbon removal, though, agriculture can win massively on carbon removal. Mining can win big on carbon removal. Oceans can win big, and forests can win big on carbon removal. Even oil and gas can play really big in carbon removal, and that's really an umbrella that is a very powerful possible future for carbon removal, where it's the climate solution that enabled the world's biggest industries, the world's biggest workforces, to go to work for the climate while growing their businesses.
Yeah, and that's why I think, and I've been speaking in these terms during the Legion 44 process of making the movie, and now talking about what this is about, is that we live inside the carbon cycle. This is a giant innovation in materials production, fuels production, farming, how we manage soil. So that, I think, is what the industry needs to lean in on. And I know it's a bit of a course correct, because people who had companies were signing these pledges, like, we're only going to do removals.
We've had companies that are removing carbon at the same time as they're, for example, mining nickel. We've got companies that are able to pull carbon dioxide from the sky, and they can make plastics or fuels or store it. And I think in this, in the next period, it's, well, maybe that can be, 3 revenue streams for your business. Most immediately, I think a lot of teams are attracted to, and a lot of innovators are attracted to, okay, cool, this is a way to actually remove carbon from the sky. But it's really important to highlight the benefits, or even start with the benefits. We saw, this is one of our graduates, was on the cover of the New York Times. This is Carbon Run. This is their facility up in Nova Scotia, where they're improving river health and improving fishing, and they're also removing carbon. And the framing for this article really came through as, this is benefiting fish, benefiting fishing, and also it's doing carbon removal. And so I encourage anybody that's working in this to try out different revenue streams as you're building your business, and find out what is going to actually work. What is that going to actually lead to you being able to scale the impact that you're having? And that can be, we're really focused on improving soil health for farmers, and also it happens to remove carbon. That was, I heard that in the narrative of Legion 44 too. It was, look, farmers are saying, hey, this stuff actually improves our crops. This makes farming better. Let's do that all day long. Like, you can wake me up in the middle of the night and say, hey, I've got something that improves the thing you're already working on. Do you want it? Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. So there's really a completely different conversation that's possible there when you connect with things that people already value.
And it's free in that case. So exactly. The liming material is free. Yes, there's upside from the carbon credits that they're not getting, but in their case right now, that's not their business. They're farmers. So it's a win-win. It really is a win-win. I don't see a downside to that. And in Legion 44, we feature Lithos in Virginia and North Carolina, where some of the farmers were accepting the material for free, which helped them with the acidification of their soil to make it more alkaline. And the mine was happy because that was a waste product that was just building up in the mine. So really, it was a beautiful example of circularity, not just in materials, but also with people, just help working together and creating a new sort of a new industry, as well as a new circularity of people and material. Anyway, I repeated myself there, but I just thought that was really interesting, and that's happening all across carbon. I know that Brilliant Planet makes really interesting materials with their algae ponds. They make this magnetic sand, which is fascinating, and apparently, depending on what kind of algae it is, you can make different things like beta carotene. I guess it's endless. So that is extremely compelling. And you had mentioned 12. We almost put them in our film.
Yeah, 12 is they're making. They've made a line of consumer products, so you can get sunglasses that are made with plastic made by the 12 process. They're making jet fuel. They're really leading on what are the different types of things that we can make with carbon. New Light, of course. You might have, if you're listening to this, you might have come across one of their air carbon straws. They pop up everywhere, and those are made from carbon, and that really demonstrates this potential of, look, carbon removal can be the source of materials of processes that actually plug in really well into our economy.
Yeah, I really think it's a new era of looking at production of materials and fuels, as well as with biochar and enhanced rock weathering, looking at ways of managing soil, and also, concrete, cement, all of that process too is involved. So I think it's like bigger than the internet. I know Christoph from Climeworks had said back in 2016, I think, this is bigger than the internet. This is far bigger. And sometimes when adversity strikes, it actually helps accelerate development and evolution, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it takes something. It's something that shocks us that can put things on a different path. And the White House taking climate change off has shocked a lot of people, and that can be the spark that starts something new. Yeah, look at this moment as like this is shocking. And what does it make possible in the future that wasn't possible before?
Do you want to say anything else about what you're doing right now, and what AirMiners is doing, just to close out? And maybe we can talk in the future, just catching up periodically so that we can stay on the same page.
For people listening, AirMiners we're out to remove 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide by 2030. Of course, that means we have educational programs, we have accelerators, we have investment funds, we're building out a club for carbon credit champions in large corporations. On the educational piece, we have a 6-week introduction to carbon removal. It's all online. We've had 1,000 people graduate from it. People who go on to take jobs in carbon removal, go on to work for companies like Climeworks and others that are featured in Legion 44 from all over the world. So that's a great touch point for people who want to continue their carbon removal journey. They find jobs, start companies, go work in policy. We have so many people find AirMiners Boot Up to be that jumping off point. If they start a company, we've got our accelerator program that's had more than 200 companies graduate from it, and that's a touch point for anybody who's an entrepreneur. And then for anybody who's a corporate sustainability champion, whether they've got sustainability in their job title or it's just something they care about and they want to see their company taking action, we're building out our buyers club for that, to unleash a new wave of corporate champions for carbon removal. And we're at airminers.com is our website. You can connect to all those things.
Well, fantastic. So that's it, Tito, I think, for today. I think that might be helpful.